Family Resource Center on Disabilities is the Region 1 Parent Training and Information Center of Illinois. You can reach us at 312-939-3513 or email us at info@frcd.org or visit our website at www.frcd.org. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter at FRCDPTI, subscribe to our YouTube page at FRCD1231, and like us on Facebook. Family Resource Center on Disabilities is not a law firm or a legal service agency. Thank you for joining Family Resource Center on Disabilities Lunch and Learn webinar, Dissecting the IEP, Part 6, Extended School Year. This presentation will be presented by FRCD Bilingual Parent Trainer Zabita Pasha. This webinar is being recorded. If at any time you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or type your question in the question box in your control panel. At a later date, we will send the PowerPoint and supporting materials that go along with this webinar. Okay, Zabita, you can begin.
Thank you so much, Paula, and again, welcome to our luncheon webinar, and this is part 6, and this is the last part, which is the extended school year. First of all, I just want to remind everybody who we are and what we do. We are a parent training information center. What we do is empower, inform, educate parents on their rights and how to navigate the special education process, also be the best advocate for your child. Like I said, today, webinar is about the extended school year, and we have been navigating with this technology. Hopefully today it will not deceive me. Okay, it did not. So today we will talk about this extended school year, and it is a component of the IEP if the student is eligible. So we will kind of highlight certain things. In other words, I'm doing today the ABC of the ESY. And I'm focusing on the spotlight on the practices of ESY. First of all, we have to define, on the objective of this presentation. So we will do an overview, what is ESY and what is the legal framework of ESY. And please forgive me if I'm using the acronym ESY a lot because it's extended school year, it's too many words. Determining the need for ESY and who is eligible, who makes the decision, what is the role of the IEP team in that decision. The important component that I really will focus on is determining the adequacy of the services offered in ESY and data collection. Most importantly, where the ESY will be implemented. In other words, what is the relationship between ESY and the least restrictive environment? Because when we talk about special education, we all the time emphasize the services and support first, then the placement or the least restrictive environment will be second. So without any further ado, here is the overview, the legal framework of the ESY. It is not per se stated in the regulation. It is not mentioned as a statute, but it appears in the free appropriate provision regulation. So what does that say? That each agency or each public agency must ensure that the ESY services are available as necessary to provide FAPE, consistent with the state board policy. So in Illinois, it is the smaller entity for legal framework because we have Illinois regulation, and they are you can find them in Code 226 or Part 226. There is no specific criteria for determining the need of ESY. The eligibility and determination of nature and extent of ESY services is the IEP team decision, clearly. ESY services might be provided only if the child's IEP committee or team determined on an individualized based in accordance with that code. But again, there is no statute that you can refer to. But if you go to IDEA building the legacy and look at the provision of FAPE, you will definitely see ESY. Now, we talked about IDEA and the legal framework of ESY and their free appropriate public education provision. That has to be also in accordance with the state regulation. Here's what our state says, that it addresses this requirement that special education and related services that are provided to a child with a disability beyond the normal school year of the public agency in accordance with the child IEP at no cost to the parent. Here it is underlined in free appropriate public education to meet the requirement of, again, section 226, and that's our special education code in the state of Illinois, and the regs is 750C of this part. And I had literally put the administrative code, just for you as a reference. So this is what IDEA said and what Illinois said about ESY. A little background on special education and related services that are provided for a child with a disability can be extended above the normal school year or the school day in accordance with the IEP. And of course, we all know that the IEP must highlight all areas of need, all supports and services that the child needs to access general education curriculum and make gains and make improvement. This special education and related services should be at no cost to the parent, and that is the free appropriate public education provision to meet the standard of Illinois and also IDEA. And it is decided by an IEP team. It is kind of redundant. ESY, it is not based on categories of disability, child care. It is not a child care, definitely, because a lot of times we are all parents and we struggle in the summer. How can we arrange the child care? Definitely do not talk about, well, I have to go to work and I need my child to be in summer school. First of all, we have to kind of differentiate between summer school and ESY, and there is a specific slide that will talk about this. ESY is an automatic program provision from year to year. Let's say you have your child and they have a bunch of goals, and you see that the timing of those goals would not be appropriate for your child to finish those goals and make those gains in those skills. So ESY come into play. Summer school, it is compensatory program or enrichment services, and it happens a lot in high school, and I've seen that pattern extensively. ESY required to maximize student potential, not the grades. When I say the potential, that means that they need to make the progress in their curriculum. So here is an overview or a comparison, ESY and summer school. Special education and related services are provided to a child with a disability beyond the normal school year of the public agency in accordance with the child IEP. Taking in consideration free appropriate public education. Summer school is a regular educational summer program that are defined, and it is based on what are the policies of each school district. Let's say you are listening and your school district in Chicago, and we have another listener or participant from South Holland. There are two different policies in there. It's based on the resources as offered of the calendar year that encompassed by the regular school terms. So here it is not involving special education in any kind of way. This is summer school, but ESY applies mostly for special education and related services when the kid is receiving special education. Again, we do not talk about ESY and make it, kind of like a summer school or a daycare. Refrain from saying those things because it does not help to get the services. Focus on the need of your child or your student and discuss it. How can we further increase the potential of learning and making those needs met and those goals be met. So special education and services that are meeting the standards of each state and are provided to a special education or a student who receives special education, they are provided in accordance with the IEP. This is more on ESY. So they are provided at no cost to the parent and are provided only if the IEP team determine that the services are needed for the student to meet free appropriate public education. The ESY can be determined on an annual basis, and we have seen this pattern specifically in our line of work, that during the annual review, we bring up, the ESY, and sometimes they said we need a little bit more time. And this pattern had happened for families who have the annual review early in the year. Let's say we're talking about January or February. It's a little early to determine if the ESY is warranted or not. Usually the decision is made in the spring. And why? Because, during spring, you have more data to rely on to see if the ESY is needed or not. It is necessary for the child to receive free appropriate public education at no cost to the parent to meet their unique need. That's the definition of free appropriate public education. It is determined based on the IEP and also based on the individualized needs of the student. I might have to pause for a minute, please. So, extended school year is for all students from 3 to 20 with a current eligibility and a current IEP that must be considered. Before we even open a conversation about ESY, the students must have an IEP. For those kiddos who are just coming out of early intervention, going to early childhood, they are eligible to receive ESY. And I will further explain this because it's very tricky and very unique because they haven't been in the school system. So we don't have a lot of data. It is also based on objectives and on the current IEP, and all student performance data must be received. So we have to compare the students to others, and when I say the student performance, I have to be specific. So we have to see where they are. Data must be examined using all criteria. In Illinois, we have specific criteria. So the student with disability must be determined to need to receive services under ESY or not. It is according to one or more criteria. In this webinar, we have collected some good information, research-based, to determine and identify the criteria to receive services under ESY. So the extension of academic year, it is totally different. So any district or any public agency that offers special education program during regular academic year must make program available beyond normal school year. We all know and we all heard about the budget. Please do not let that be a hindrance to open the conversation about ESY. Because most of the time they said, well, we don't have resources to open the school. Well, can you find another place where my child can finish his or her working, on their goals and making, the gains and the expected progress. ESY extends preceding academic school year. It does not anticipate the year to come. What does that mean? I'm going beyond this slide. What does that mean? It means that we cannot expose the student during ESY to the upcoming year curriculum. The ESY is designed for the student to continue working on his or her goals, current goals for the current school year. Let's say you have a third grade student and they need to work on writing skills, kind of coherent writing, coming up with the main idea, punctuation, capitalization. Next school year in fourth grade, they have to expand on that writing. They have to put more detail. During that ESY, we cannot work on that. We have to limit the work only solely on that goal of coherent, capitalization, punctuation, and proper grammar. If it is, of course, and I'm talking like assuming that is in their IEP. So where can ESYP provide it? It's a very, very good question. And sometimes we do not get the straightforward answer when we talk about it to our team. ESY can be provided in a variety of settings based on the supports and services lined out in the IEP. It can be provided at home. It can be provided in a school setting. It can be in a school base with a community activities, like let's say a park district. It can, accommodate the student there. It has to be an arrangement. Related services can be, provided in these settings. So in other words, we talk about the ESY and the settings. In other words, we are talking about ESY and least restrictive environment. So if a student who is in a cluster program that is very restrictive and they do not have resources to have that cluster program open during the summer or after the school year, then the school and the parent can arrange where the student who have high needs, academic needs, for example, where he receive the services. They can arrange it at home. They can send him to another school, or if if the student is involved in school park district activities, they can arrange that they can provide that. And I'm giving that example because it had happened before. Do know that the school, the ESY services, they are minimum to 20 instructional days, depending on what the IEP says, meaning it is 4 weeks to 5 weeks. I have seen it 6 weeks, but that was years and years ago. I have seen lately 4 years. It is the same length of the school as day for students of same age level attending summer school. What does it mean? That if the students who are attending summer school for excellence or for enrichment, they are attending for 3 hours a day, then the ESY must match that length of time. It may also be provided during spring and winter breaks. Now, this does not happen in Illinois, and there are no provision in the regulation of Illinois for the ESY to be provided during a winter break, and I will explain why. So extended school year criteria, and that's what I talked about earlier. Before I move on into that, I would like to give an example of a case of my child who has autism. So years ago, they offered us 4 weeks, and we said, hey, she cannot really have only 4 weeks because here is the duration of the goal. It was a comprehension goal and a math goal and also a writing goal. I said, is the 2 hours and a half on a daily basis will allow you to work on all of these 3 goals. Each goal is 50 minutes. So we're talking about 150, then she have to have a breather and a snack. And they said, well, this is what we have. So there is no indication that the student needed ESY beyond what Chicago Public School offered to us. And the rationale behind that, they said because they did not have the place to where she can work on a 5-week program versus, the 4 weeks that they offer us. And then we kind of discussed with them, how can we compensate that 5th week for her to meet those goals? And they said, when she comes back, then we can continue on working on those goals. It was a very interesting conversation regarding, the length and also how many weeks and what have you. So these are the criteria, some of the criteria to determine the ESY: regression, recoupment, critical point of instruction, and extenuating circumstances, meaning, special circumstance. So regression or recoupment can be characterized as a significant regression of a previously learned skill during a break in service and limited or delayed recoupment of these skills after a service resumes. Again, my child's example, when we take a break from school specifically during, the winter break. So she is on a mode of work, and all of a sudden they get those 2 weeks. When she go back, she has difficulties to pick up the skill. Let's say currently we're still working on comprehension. She have difficulties to pick up where she left off during, the instruction between September and December. And then sometimes in math, she literally loses the skills. And that is a problem. So we have regression, and she has difficulty to recoup after the break. And it takes them a while because her autism is affecting her adaptive skills. So it's very difficult for her to adapt very quickly. So regression and recoupment occur when the amount of time required to relearn the skill or behavior becomes so significant that interfere with the ongoing educational process. And that's exactly what had happened to us. She needs that continuum and the exposure to that curriculum and to those skills on a daily basis, literally. That's how she functioned, and that's how she retained the information. Example, a loss of a skill on an IEP objective after at least 2 weeks or breaks in instruction without regaining the documented level of skill prior to these breaks within the specified period. Please be aware that you have to have documentation and I'm losing my word, you have to forgive me. Documentation and progress monitoring, that was the word that I was looking for. Progress monitoring. What does that mean? You have your student or your child, you monitor them on a daily basis, of course, and we also monitor on a weekly basis to see, okay, what did she learn? Did she retain that? Is she generalizing? And I'm talking about, again, about my child who is in high school. Is she generalizing those skills across the board? If she does, and she does it consistently, it's fantastic. We stop that skill, working on that skill. Not stop. We move on to the next set of skills. But sometimes the next set of skills require the prior one to move on. Let's say for math, for simple example of division. Division require multiplication. So if we are teaching her multiplication, she mastered all of that, and we're moving on to division, and I notice that she has difficulties to remember, then I provide her with the multiplication chart. If it does not help, it tells me that she had regressed and she needs recoupment time, meaning that she needs that time frame where she can recuperate her knowledge and her skill. So regression is a decline in knowledge or skill that can result from interruption in instruction and in instruction and in education. The recoupment is the amount of time that takes to regain the prior knowledge or the skill that was taught or that the student had learned. So break in instruction. A break of at least 5 consecutive days, instructional days, can cause these regression and recoupment. I will add one more thing that is not on this slide. It depends on how the disability is affecting the student or your child. There are cases where the disability is not affecting the learning of the student on an academic level. So they literally need a little bit of reminder and what have you, but they need those functional skills or adaptive skills. I go back a little bit to the regression and recoupment. So if possible, the regression does not necessarily mean the student require ESY services, because all students may regress to some extent during lengthy breaks, especially summer. Focus when, and I've heard this so many times in our meetings. They said, oh, if we do this, we have to do it for the entire school. I go back and I refer to the IEP. ESY services are only necessary if it will benefit the student to gain during school year, and if there will be significant jeopardizing of the services interruption without ESY. My daughter really get jeopardized if she does not have that continuum of services. Literally, she forgets the skill on a heartbeat, and it takes us time, and that's the recoupment, to put her back on track. In the fall, when she go back, literally we have to talk about school and we have to review certain things way ahead of the school. And it sounds kind of not okay, but if it require for her, to have that continuum, that's what we need to do. May regression and recoupment analysis to be sole criteria for ESY? Yes, based on the Office of Special Education Program. Purpose of ESY is to prevent regression and recoupment problems. Yes, the state or the public agency may use such criteria, but also have flexibility for making the ESY determination. And this is in accordance of IDEA and FAPE provision. Again, ESY, it is not to increase the level, it's not to improve the grades, but keep that momentum of learning. Students with disability may be eligible for ESY if there is evidence, documentation, proof that ESY is needed and is warranted to allow the student to maintain the progress during a critical point of instruction. And that's the key word, maintain progress. You have certain grade levels that we need to make sure that the students have that continuum, such as transition from 8th grade going to high school. So they need to keep working on those goals and to transition smoothly to high school. You have certain districts, they have the early elementary and then they have the transition to middle school. We make sure it's no more than those supports on a social emotional level that will help the student to maintain the progress. So critical point of instruction, utilize to prevent a loss of general education class time or an increase in special education service time. This example is so accurate that the student may not be keeping up with work in the general education class and the IEP committee is considering movement to a more restrictive setting. So here, the kids that have difficulties to keep up. First of all, if we have these difficulties and it is throughout the year, we will have to open a conversation about accommodation and modification, and I can refer back to our webinar of accommodation and modification. If that does not work, then the ESY is warranted, as the conversation has to be open. Okay, he's not able to keep up because we have these goals, we have 7 goals in his IEP, and he has difficulties. Let's talk about ESY. And to prevent a loss of significant progress made towards the acquisition or maintenance of critical skills, specifically instructional or academic skills. Social, emotional, it is in the conversation, but / behavior. So we have this 10-year-old as an example with multiple disabilities has just learned to activate an augmentative communication device to answer basic question, yes or no, more or less, for example, and will not retain this skill unless if it is practiced consistently in a structured setting. Here, this example can give me the cue of having this instruction even at home. And I can have, the parents train to deal with this. And that's ESY services for this kid at home in a least restrictive environment. If it is only solely this skill that he needs to keep working at or to gain. The extenuating circumstances, they are very special, but before I go, to that, we have to make sure that the IEP team is addressing all the needs of the student before we even open the ESY conversation. Here is, my daughter's example again. She has so many skill deficits across the board on an instructional, social, emotional, to some extent behavior, even though, the behavior may not look like physicalities, but it is a disturbance to her environment. So when we talked this year about her IEP, they looked at me and they said, she's doing fine. When I said, okay, she's doing fine because everything is significantly modified in the first place. And if you remember, and if you attended our modification and accommodation webinar, modification have low expectations in instruction. They decrease, they shrink the curriculum. And I said, no, this year we have to put a little bit more so we can work on it even on ESY. It is open as a conversation right now because everything is on hold in Chicago Public School, but we are not going to let that down. So the extenuating circumstances, after the IEP team had reviewed the student period and usual situation circumstance may exist, which result in the IEP team to determine whether the student is in need of ESY or services. Most of the time they said, oh no, they come back and they are fine. Well, I will ask specifically question, what does it mean fine to you as an educator and as an administrator in the school system? Regression is when they lost a skill. Recoupment is when they take time, to go back. Do you have more resources to help the kid when they go back in September or August? Do you have more resources to speed up that progress? Most of the time, they said, okay, we will have, extra resource, or the kid can stay after school or during lunch, they can do the study hall. That is not enough. That is not enough, and that is just my honest professional opinion. Study hall is about 45 minutes, and you have 7 goals to work on different skills. I don't think it will be enough. Example of the extenuating circumstance: the child entered the school at some point during the year with little or no assessment data or information. In other words, when you don't have enough data, then they have to apply this special circumstance. From sending the school district, and the IEP team does not have the time to collect the data as needed to determine regression or recoupment, because the kids, first of all, haven't been in that school setting for the whole year, so they don't have a whole lot. However, the IEP team has some data that indicate the child will experience some form of regression on a critical skill, for example, that the augmentative communication device, without the continued provision of special education services. So they determine that they have to provide the ESY. In extenuating circumstances, the IEP team or committee must use all available data, their knowledge, involve the parent, because also the parents are knowledgeable about their children's needs, and their professional judgment to determine the child needs for ESY. So ESY, it is not limited to a certain disability or disability categories. It does not limit to the type, amount, or duration of the ESY. And this is IDEA regulation. Again, it's not a statute, but under free appropriate public education. So the other factors is that we have to identify the needs in the IEP, and in other factors, some school districts and some IEP teams should consider, in addition to regression and recoupment, the degree of impairment, the ability of parents to provide educational structure at home, rate of progress. We have families who are in transient and they are in movement. For example, the military families, they move from one place to the other. There is no consistency. So the kids are losing skills and they are not consistently receiving those same amount of and duration, and also the place is different, the circumstance is different, the environment is different. We have to also consider the other factor of behavior and physical problems, the availability of alternative resources, the ability to interact with non-disabled peers, and again, we are underlining here the least restrictive environment, area of curriculum needing attention. In our case, in our home, is the comprehension. That's the main area and the bottom line for our kids, to continue her services. Vocational needs. She is in high school and she has transition goals and she has vocational needs. She volunteers, she has a paid volunteer job, so she needs to continue on understanding Payroll, payday, paycheck. She need to know transportation. She need to know the time. I need to be at work at 10. I have to leave at 9:30. All of what is coming with the package of vocational employment and based on her IEP goals for transition. Other factors can be also emerging skills and breakthrough opportunities. And I've seen this specifically in small kiddos who are just learning the sight words, just learning the colors, just learning, little things. So there is no single factor that can make the child eligible for the ESY. It does not have to be the degree of the disability, because I've heard sometimes the parents, oh, my child have a severe intellectual disability and they need the extended school year because I can't deal with them at home. Well, no, you are underlining there babysitting, literally. ESY decision-making. All decision-making regarding the needs, the provision of ESY services must be based upon data collection that should be done throughout the school year. You have this school, you have this IEP that will start from January 2016 to January 2017. The kid went on Christmas break, 2 weeks. He came, he has difficulties. The grades drop. During spring break, he has difficulties. Again, you seeing, struggles, grades that drop, and extended time, study hall, all of those things. I will look at that very, very thoroughly and very carefully to make sure that as a parent, I will make the informed decision to determine ESY or not. A review of all student performance, and basically the student performance are the assessments. Here in Illinois, we rely intensively on the MAP or the NWEA for elementary, the PARC to some extent, and the Prairie Scott for high school, the ACT and the SAT. When we determine, the student need for ESY. Now, for ACT or the state assessment testing, the SAT, if we're talking and considering those data, we will talk about credit, that's high school. ESY is not here to recoup or regroup a credit. There is a system, and this is just on the side note, there is a system that is called the credit recovery. And that credit recovery will help your child to recover the credit. Let's say you have this kid who have mental illness and are not able to attend the school, and because of their attendance they are not exposed to the curriculum, so they are not meeting those credit during the school year. ESY is not there to recoup that credit. They have to do a credit recovery system, and you can discuss this if you have that case with your school district, specifically those who have the IEP management or coordination. ESY decision-making, determination of the need of ESY services should flow from and be incorporated within the IEP meeting and during the regular school year and instructional data. Determining if the student is in need of ESY services is integrated within everything that the IEP team will, including, of course, the family member or the parent is already doing when making the instruction decision on a regular basis throughout the student program. In other words, you have all of those goals on an instructional, and I'm focusing on instructional specifically. And the teacher, they just kind of send in the homework, and after you go and pick up your son or daughter's report card, I personally specifically ask, what is the data for this report card? I'm seeing A's or B's or C's, whatever the case may be, how they were earned. Specifically, when I see the C's and D's and F's, I would ask, okay, what is the data? How was it done? Was it enough time for, the student to complete the skill? Did they learn the skill? I just want to identify if it is an ability problem that is a skill problem, or if it is an attention, for example, a functional skill problem. If it is a functional skill problem, we will have another conversation. Then we have to strengthen those needs. with functional needs goals, where they have to help the student to be attentive, provide, motivation for the student to continue, doing the work, taking breaks as necessary, and what have you. It's a list of things. The ongoing data collection is the student performance on goals and objectives. When you see, that IEP report card, and you will see making progress, not making progress. These are criteria or indicators if the student will receive ESY. Specifically, when you say making progress, right there, I will request data. Okay, if they are making progress, are they meeting all of those measurements? Let's say you have a goal with a trier, 5 times out of 6, he will do such from February to April, which is, tomorrow is report card pickup for elementary, and, today I believe is elementary and tomorrow is high school. Is he or she making it on their own? That's the bottom line, is the independence of the skill. Then they said, no, we're prompting them. At what rate did you prompt your student? And so forth. It's a lot of information involved, but be specific on those goals that the student is working on or your child is working on. The assessment data collected should indicate the progress the student is making towards acquisition of his or her goals and objectives, and may include, grade, class, subject test, classroom work, classroom assessment, homework, because, we all know that the homework is part of the grades. We also consider in the data collection performance-based assessment, portfolio entries. Yes.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
You surely can.
Okay. I have a question from a parent, Lucia Cueto, and it goes along with what you were just talking about. She says, thanks for adding it in the webinar series. My son, I'm assuming 8th grade, starts high school in the fall in a different district. His grades in the first 3 quarters this year have been F, F, and F. He has struggled with math during middle school, but the school says that he does not need ESY each of the 2 years that I have asked. Do I have a right to request ESY for him?
Yes, and put it in writing. Discuss it and open the IEP, because for you to get the ESY, you have to open up an IEP meeting. And also, these grades are indicators of either, something going on with the goals that he's working on, and you have to kind of be specifically asking them, the struggle that he has in math, is it a skill deficit? And if they admit it is a skill deficit, and really I will advise you to get the classroom work, classroom assessment. Of course, you see the homework when he bring it home, and also indicate during the homework, if you support your son and help him, to get through that homework, how much of prompting are you giving him? And that alone, it shows a skill deficit and he's not getting it. If it is an attention issue, he's just bored, he's not paying attention, that's a little bit different. I would kind of open the ESY conversation, embedded with the functional skill deficit. They have to continue working with him to meet the goals. That F, to me, he's not meeting the goals. And we are getting close to the school, to the end of the school year. How is he going to meet that goal, going to high school? The other portion of your question, can you request to pay a tutor as a part of ESY? The first thing that is advisable is to open the conversation, first of all, for them to say, yes, he is eligible to receive services for ESY. Then if they said, well, we don't have the school here and we don't have the resources there, your question will be where and who is going to provide it. They say, well, we have to get back with you. You can suggest that you have somebody who can monitor, because if you paying a tutor, they make sure they had to do progress monitoring on those goals. That's the purpose of ESY, not not to improve the grades, but to improve the performance, to make sure he maintains his skills that he is learning. But those grades are alarming, Lucia. Did I answer your question?
We'll give her a moment to respond.
Sure. I understand it is complicated. I will highly recommend that you call us or call me, and we can have an individualized, conversation on this, so I can gain more information from you, because I'm seeing only the grades, but I'm missing other components. So if it is possible at all, Paula, my coworker, can email you my email address and my phone number, and we can have a conversation. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you, Lucia. I'm going to move on. Okay. Okay. You are welcome. So we will be in touch. So the ongoing data collection, it is the performance-based assessment portfolio entries. When I say portfolio, go back to the IEP and look at the evaluation data in your child's IEP. If it is saying portfolio, I will request that portfolio from the school, and it should have all of the work done during the classroom, during the assessment, all of it. Student work sample, and that is included in the portfolio. State and district accountability test, mainly in elementary, is going to be the NWEA or MAP or PARCS. Progress reports that we receive occasionally. Behavioral checklist. Please do not forget the behavior. It's so important, because you have these kids who have these behavioral needs. And once there is an interruption, because with the behavior, it is apparent that they need a structure. And if it is interrupted because of summer break, then we need to rely on that checklist to see if this kid will need the ESY to continue working on those behavioral challenges and addressing them, of course, with intervention. Task analysis, that is so important. Here, it is underlining a functional skill, teacher observation log, but it has to have data. I can have an observation log, but if I don't have a sample of work, it's kind of iffy, especially when we're talking about academic work. My computer froze again. I have to go back. So the data that are collected on ongoing basis throughout the school year are used to make instructional decisions. So here if you notice in our presentation material, we highlighted instructional decision for the student are the basis of making ESY decision. Not to improve the grade, not to get more credit if your child is in high school, not to be in enrichment and they have a competition going next year and they need to know more. ESY is for them to maintain the progress, maintain the skill taught, and not regress. ESY Determination Re-Cap. So at the annual IEP meeting, which I highly recommend, Lucia, you have to open up an IEP conversation with your team to discuss your son's progress and related issues, including, how can we address these issues by providing extensive, support during ESY. Explain and give the parent legal or legal guardian the ESY fact sheets, which you can find it online, and we have some more resources with our presentation. Discuss the regression and recoupment and the special circumstance criteria, as well as the possibility of extenuating circumstance. Discuss the ongoing data collection, and this is so important. The data is the bottom line for determining the ESY or not. During the school year, the teacher or the IEP team should collect the student performance, to review the student progress, lack of progress regularly, and grades are part of that conversation and that progress. As part of the annual IEP team, or a separate meeting specifically to ESY, which will be your case, Lucia. Examine the student instructional data. Why my child is receiving those grades? Why he's performing below? He used to have A, and now I'm seeing only D's and F's. Why is that? Are we in need of ESY? This is part, of the discussion that you can have with your team. So ESY is determined. Then what? Once the IEP team has determined the need for ESY services, the IEP team may reflect on specific services to be provided with the link to measurable goals, short-term goal, or objective or benchmark. Who will be providing the service? The amount of the time that will be offered, how the services will be delivered, direct or consultative, where the services will be provided. So we are here indicating the least restrictive environment and how the services will be evaluated. So important. It is not really productive or helpful if the student is attending ESY and we don't have an evaluation or an outcome. I'm going to highlight a little bit the case of the 3-year-old because I kind of cover it, but I cover it in short. I have an example of a 3-year-old with cerebral palsy. The parent demonstrated disabling condition likely to continue indefinitely, a likelihood that the gross motor of this kid may regress over the summer without ESY. Now, this kid is coming from the early intervention. So the early intervention people, or the CFC, the Child Family Connection, they have to work harder in this case. You have this kid who is turning 3 in April, for example. They are going to have the transition meeting late April. They are going to put the kid 1 month, for example, the month of May, and they said, okay, we're done. No, we are not done because this kid, for example, this 3-year-old with cerebral palsy, and they have gross motor skills deficits, cannot walk, cannot do a whole lot. They need that ongoing therapy for them, for them to be successful. The parent did not establish that the student has limited recoupment capacity when the school started in fall. So now the parent really have to work harder when you have a 3-year-old. It's very tricky because the student is not well established in the school system. They don't know a whole lot about the student. So they will go with what the parents will bring and also what the CFC will bring. Other examples of the eligibility, for example, a 12-year-old with ADHD. They said, oh, no, we are not providing ESY. We could not recover information lost over the summer when the teacher reviewed the material at the beginning of the school year. So the parent pointed to low assessment test score for 6th grade, but that information was not yet available at the time of the IEP. In this case, let's say they did the park, I believe, in March. As of now, we don't have the results of the park. All of us, we don't have it. So if they will provide us with those park testing results by the end of May, and I see very low scored indicating that the student is not learning those skills, I will open up a conversation about ESY through an IEP meeting. Because they will say the rationale, there is no regression and recoupment, but here is a special circumstance of, this data collection. There are many cases of ESY determination, how to determine the ESY. So determining the need for ESY services should not be made as a game time. Decision should be at an annual meeting, but if the IEP meeting is done in October, and from October to May or June, then we have to really focus on collecting the data and go back and open the IEP conversation and IEP team. And we have to make sure we communicate with the teacher and service provider at the beginning of the year. If you have your child's IEP meeting, in example, in November, October, even in January, talk about data collection. Make sure it is documented in the IEP. Analyze data periodically with your team. When you go pick up that report card, analyze the data. Say, hey, how many pounds did you give my child for this goal? How much of support did they do this skill on their own? Did they do this? Did they meet that? Data collection is so important across the board for any service, little would know for ESY. Develop and keep current ESY worksheet with summaries of observation. It's an internal, and I have been exposed to it through my child's IEP. It's a bunch of paperwork that they gave us to help data collection to prove the evidence of regression or recoupment difficulties for our child. The adequacy of the ESY services is to make sure that free, appropriate public education is provided. So the district must provide these underlying free, appropriate public education. But remember, the criteria for determining whether the student needs ESY to receive free FAPE is different. That's the purpose of ESY, is to prevent regression and to prevent, that recoupment. I believe I am done, unless if you have other questions or concerns.
Yes, if at any time anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or type it in the question box. Okay. Okay, it's looking like I'm not seeing any additional questions. So at this time, if it's okay with you, Zabita, we will close out today's webinar, the final webinar of our 6-series IEP series.
Okay, thank you so much for your attendance. And I just want to highlight a few caveats of the ESY, because I'm just thinking about it, is when we talk about it, our mind goes all the time, my child needs to continue to work this, and that. The few caveat about ESY is the lack of progress is not the only way to determine the ESY. And this is the memo, and I put a note to myself to really indicate this. I would like for you to, all of you, if not, I can provide this information to Paula and she can forward it to you. There is a memo of 2003 from Office of Special Education Program, highlighted specifically the lack of progress is not the only criteria to determine ASY. Students cannot be required to fail in order to receive ASY. This is Lucia, but there is a loophole to go around that. Even if the student received ESY last summer, the student may not receive it this summer. It is not necessary. It goes by the goals, benchmarks, and data collection. And again, when you collect data with your team, you have to make sure you have all the facts. ESY may not be the same services as school year services, or the place. We have seen in Chicago that they send the student to different schools, and that's a little bit of a hassle. But if it is going to meet the need of the students, it is fine. And I am really officially now done. And again, I thank you all for attending. Thank you, Paula, for your assistance.
Thank you, Zabita.
You're welcome. Have a good day, all.